All right, so now we're going to take what you have made and we are going to turn it into something that can actually be interacted with and can be played with and actually exported as a real game. So, first thing we need to do is we need to kind of set up our scenes. First, to have a scene, we need a user interface. Now, I scrolled out a little bit so that you can see in my scene view, this is what it looks like in my game view right now. And the reason it looks super weird because nobody's monitors are this aspect ratio is because on my game tab, I have it set to free aspect ratio. I'm going to go ahead and change that. I'm going to change it to 16 by 9. It's a pretty standard ratio, about like a normal computer screen. And as you see from the screen, that looks much more normal, right? So that's all taken care of. And now my game and my scene look normal back and forth if I flip between the two. Next, I'm going to take my scene and mm, let's see. Let's rename it. We'll save scene as. We're going to save it in the scenes folder. And we're going to save this scene as the game gameplay. We'll call this the gameplay screen. Just going to save it like so. And now you'll see in my scenes folder, there is a gameplay scene. So if I double click on the gameplay scene, it loads up the gameplay scene. Now, everything that was on my other one, so including my game object that has my game script on it, is on here already because I'm just took the same scene and renamed it. I could have also technically come down here and I could have um, duplicated it with, let's see, Control D. Yep, Control D would have duplicated it. I don't necessarily want to do that, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete that extra scene, so I don't need that. And I'm also going to delete this original scene because I don't need it, and you'll see later why having extra scenes can be very distracting. So that's deleted. I'm in my gameplay scene right now. I clicked open just in case, but it's definitely open. My main camera, everything looks normal here, still looks the same. My game object still has my game script attached to it. Let's rename game object so that I know exactly what game object is. So let's call this gameplay. And you see this little asterisk that popped up next to the scene. That just means it's not saved. Any changes that I have made since opening this scene have not been saved yet. That'll happen anytime you make any type of change. And so now we get into the fun stuff. We're going to start making this something that you can interact with. So in the hierarchy, you can right click and you can do all kinds of things here. First, we're going for this game, pretty much the whole thing is going to be UI based. There's not going to be any tile mapping or anything like that. It's just going to be a user interface that we are going to put buttons on and feed text into. So, first of all, we have our UI, and let's put a canvas on our scene. So now you have this bigger box that just appeared. And I'm going to scroll out, scroll out, scroll out, scroll out. Voila. Okay. That is your canvas. This is the area we're actually going to be working in. We're going to be putting buttons and canvas elements right here. I don't necessarily like that I accidentally nested that underneath my gameplay object. So let's take it out. We have an event system here. That's fine. I just don't want this childed to the gameplay element, just in case I change anything about the gameplay element. And my canvas really just doesn't need to be attached to that. So one interesting thing we can do here, I'm going to take my game. I'm going to put it right here. My console is kind of small now, but that's okay. I can live with that. And now, whenever I change things up here, I can see live style what happens down here. So right now I've selected the main camera And you see this background color right here on the camera is what's showing on the game screen. It doesn't show right here, it only shows on the game screen. So I'm going to click on that color and I'm going to change it because I'm not a huge fan of that kind of blue jean color. So let's go. I like bright colors, but I want it to not be painful. Let's try. We'll do kind of a dark red. That'll be pretty. Okay, just close out of that. So you saw it kind of live updated as we went there, everything like that. And let's add some elements onto our canvas. Now this is our main game area. So we know that in our game, we tell the player some things. We tell the player that or we tell them a guess. We say, what is this number higher or lower than this? And then they take that guess and they say it's higher or lower. So we need some interactive elements that they can select that choose higher or lower. And we need an area where we can put our text on the screen. So let's start with buttons because we know we need something for them to interact with. We're not going to hook them up just yet. We're just going to put them in the place that we want them. So conveniently, if you right click, I'm going to right click on canvas because I want these elements to be childed to the canvas. I'm going to come down to UI and I'm going to click button. And it builds a button for me. It's got very standard kind of information on it, and it isn't super pretty. That's fine. It's for right now, it's going to do for what I need. And you notice these things are imported with very generic names. So I'm okay with this being called Canvas, but for this button, it's possible that I'd like to rename it. So say this is the higher button. This is the button I want them to push if their guess is higher, or if we need to guess higher. I'm going to make this button a little bit of a different size and put it up here. And I'm going to change the name of the button to higher button. Getting very laggy for no reason, but okay, now we're at the higher button. I don't like the way I wrote that actually, because really, naming conventions wise, it's always better to have some capitalization going on. And if my computer would stop lagging, that would help. Higher button. There we go. That's much easier to read. And this one, I'm going to rename this to higher text. It's very descriptive, very clear what that is going to refer to. Now, if I click on these different things, so let's look at the buttons options first. Right now, we've got the position, the x-axis position, the y-axis position. It is a 2D game, so the z-axis is set to 0. We could change the width and the height here, or we could come over here to these little blue dials and change them there. It's got a pivot point, it's got rotation, scale, so if I wanted to say double this in size, I would change the scale on the x and y to 2. I would double the size. Right now the scale is set to 1. It works as a multiplier. On here we've got the image script, which shows some kind of pre-made stuff that Unity puts in there. Right now, let's look at this one right here. The color, okay, that changes the color of just the button itself. So let's say I'm gonna make this pink. Kind of stick with a theme here. All right. So regularly will be this color. Now, if we come down here to these options, these will change on an overlay over this color right here. So if we change something here, it will change uh, based on kind of a multiplier, kind of like if you're on Photoshop and you put two colors on top of each other and you change the layer mixing. That's what it will do. So let's say normal color, I want it to look like that all the time, except whenever I curse over it. I want to make it so that whenever I put my mouse over that button, it will look like it's a different color. And conveniently, Unity has already built-in code for that. You don't have to code it. It's already there. You can just change it however you want. So, do I want it to get darker or brighter? Let's let's keep it the same level of brightness, but let's turn it kind of orangey, like so. So if I hit play and I curse over it, you can see it's not the same color as this, right? Because it's as if we took this color and we overlaid it with the lower color. Stop the playing. We can also change the pressed color if we wanted to change color when we click on there, and disabled as if the button has no action that it can do. We have a disabled color, which is default gray. This stuff is what we are going to populate later with our buttons. We're going to make it so that whenever you click, it does something. In this case, in an ideal world, it would make it so that if you click and it's the higher button, then our guess would go up. So we have called this higher text right here. Let's go back up to the top. So the higher text has all the same settings as the other one. It is based in relative to this. So this one has an X and Y position. This one's X and Y position are based relatively on the position of this. So they should be 0, 0, 0, unless you're doing something, very odd with your scripting. It should be that. So right here is where we're going to change what it says. It's higher. And font. Right now we have access to very minimal fonts. We will talk about later adding fonts using a program called TextMesh Pro. Right now we'll leave it with Arial. We'll mess with all that TextMesh Pro goodies later. And we're going to leave it normal. I'm okay with the font size as it is right now. That seems pretty easily readable. Alignment, this is all stuff you should recognize from Pages or Word, where you can align it, you can wrap it, you can, find the best fit, you can change the color. It all should look very, very, very familiar. So let's say I want to change the text color. I kind of liked it black, but maybe we'll just make it like an almost black, but like a little bit red to kind of stick with my theme, my color theme I've got going here. And that's all well and good. All right, so now I have a higher button. Something else we need is a lower button, correct? Instead of going through and duplicating all of this stuff manually, I can right click on this. Actually, yes, right click on this, and I can click duplicate. And this button stays right in the same spot until I move it. And you see these handy dandy guides popping up for me telling me, this is lined up here. So now they're exactly above and below each other. I'm actually going to grab this guy and move him up a little bit because I want them to be very obviously separate. Now, it took on all the same names as the other button, so I'm going to change them. This isn't a higher button, it's a lower button. Okay? Hit enter to save that. And this text is also not higher text now, it is lower text. And in here, if you are, more careful, you can select it better than I did. It's lower. Perfect. And let's see. I don't know that I want... Yeah, I think I want these buttons to match, but I think the "you've got it right" button, I think I want that button to look different. So I'm going to, once again, I'm going to duplicate this. It doesn't matter which button I duplicate because they are basically identical. So I'm going to erase the extra one that it tagged onto the end. Let's say right button. No, that sounds like a direction. Let's say correct button. Because right could be like right as in right or left. So correct sounds more proper. Correct text. And let's change the text in here to correct. Like so. And let's go ahead and move this. I want it to try to be between these two. Oh, I only moved the text. That's something you will probably do at least once during this, is you will have the wrong thing selected. So what happened there was I had the text selected, which I can move independently of the button, but I want to select the button. Because the text is a child of the button, then I can move everything all together by selecting that. So if I move the text, but then I select the button, and I move the button, you see how this moved at the same time in the same direction. That is because they are relative to each other. So back up here, grab correct. Let's put that in a, I'm just going to eyeball it a little bit. I could probably do some math, make this real specific. That is the center of the canvas, so that seems like it was probably a good place to put it, which means this, it's lower, needs to come up just a hair. Yeah, that's pretty close. Okay. So now we're on the correct button. I want this color to be different. I'm going to change it. Yeah, I want it to be an exciting color. And let's look at what that highlight looks like. Yeah, a highlight works well for all of them. Okay. And so we have our buttons. Fantastic. We needed 3 buttons. This is our gameplay area. Now we need some text area. So first, I don't necessarily want some text that's just floating in space. I think I want to put something behind it, something on top of it, so that I can kind of make the text stand out. So let's grab just an image. I'm not going to put anything in it. I am going to try to make it roughly the right size. With the image, right now, I can change the color of the image, or I can change the source image. So if I had a picture I wanted to put in here, I could. Right now, I think I'm happy with it just being a color. Let's say, no, that's icky. Let's try something like this. This is going to be a very vintage looking game, kind of all mustard and maroon and colors such as that. Those are kind of my favorite colors anyway. So let's take this image, let's rename it because image isn't terribly descriptive. Let's call it guess background. And I want my guess to be on top of my guess background. So I'm just going to child some text to this box. That way they are attached to each other, like so. Now you see the relative position here relative to this. That shows that this text is connected to another object that I wanted to stay attached to. Now, here is the challenge. Here's what I want you to do with this. I want you to create 2 more scenes. I want you to create a scene in which you have a start game button and a quit button. And I want you to create another scene that has a replay button and a quit button. Now, how you accomplish that is up to you. What colors you use for all of this is completely up to you. Please feel free to make it your own, and we will come back and meet together after you have accomplished all of that. Okay, so now that you have your scene set up, it should look something like this. So this should look very familiar. This is the gameplay scene that I left you on. If we were to go to my end game screen, I have my play again button, I have my quit button, and on my start game screen, I have my start button and my quit button. I changed the color on the start button for fun. I don't know if I like it yet. We'll see. I can always make tweaks and adjustments later on. But for now, this is pretty good. I'm happy with it. What I would like to talk about now is just a final little adjustment to our user interface that will make it much more friendly to many more types of screens and sizes and aspect ratios. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this and I'm going to change this to free aspect. And it just fills up the whole thing. It's kind of, however I stretch or shrink this, it will stay directly in the center. And that's fine. However, if I do 5 by 4, which just really doesn't work, or 4 by 3 is going to cut it off super bad, 16 by 10, so we're back to 16 by 9. Good practice is changing the anchor points on your buttons. Now, what that means is it makes it so that right now, this anchor point right here, in reference to this button, means that this button will always be a constant distance from this point, which is why everything stays in the center of the screen whenever I change the aspect ratios. So choosing the appropriate anchor point really helps you whenever you are designing your user interface to make it so that it will flex and stretch and move according to whatever screen that it is currently on. So for instance, my quit button. Right now, it is anchored to the center of the screen. But what if I change the anchor to the bottom right-hand corner? Well, I will come over to this point right here. And this is where we will control where things are anchored on the screen. So I'm going to click this and it comes up with this big old thing of options. Now, there is stretch options and then there are anchor options. We'll deal with the stretch options in a bit, but right now let's look at the anchor options. I want to anchor it to, what did I say, the bottom right? I'll click on bottom right. And you see that moved this. You can see other things are still anchored to the center, but that one in particular is anchored to right here. I'm going to close that out. Now what happens whenever I change this to free aspect, the button moved. The button followed that edge of the screen. If I changed it to 5 by 4, it would move. It's obviously still too large for the screen, but it moves so that it is still a constant distance from that point that I hold it that it needs to follow. So let's take my start button. Let's anchor that, let's say, to the top right-hand corner. And our guest background, I think that should probably always be centered, like so, on this. And let's put it on the left side. So it's centered on the left side. Let's see what this looks like in free aspect and see if we like it. Oh, that doesn't look good at all, does it? What did I do? Looks like I might have anchored my start button in the wrong spot. So, start button. Oh, I changed my start button instead of my guest background. That's silly of me. Silly mistakes are easy to make. There we go. So now that you notice that shadow anchor point is gone because nothing is anchored to the center of the screen anymore. Now if I change it, let's see what it looks like. Now everything spreads way far apart. Now that's not a great look, but very rarely are you going to have somebody with this extreme of an example of not fitting or not being the way it's supposed to look. Let's try. That makes them overlap each other. But you see, they are staying anchored exactly where I told them to stay anchored. Now, I'm a little concerned. Here's why. I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it up here, make this real big. Now, these are starting to spread really far to the top right corners. So I don't know if I want them to do that or not. So let's play around with the anchors. Let's say center right. Well, let's undo that. Let's take it right here. Let's go back to our um, favorite aspect ratio. Well, it's already at 16 by 9. So let's move this so that it's in line. And let's do like so. Take this quit button, move this up here, and see if that gives us something a little bit more pleasing to the eye. If my quit button is anchored to the center right as well. Now, when I change it, I kind of like that better. I think that these should stay in line with each other. If they don't, they look a little weird.